And in the Philippines, millions have begun voting for a new president. In the latest, outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte and his daughter have cast votes in their hometown of Davao City. The outgoing president, leaving after 6 years in power, has not endorsed any presidential candidate for this election. His daughter, Sara Duterte Capio, is tipped to win the vice presidency. Meanwhile, a deadly shooting happened in the Mindanao Island, which is a restive region in the southern Philippines. 3 security guards were killed when gunmen opened fire at a polling station. Hours before voting began, 9 people were wounded when 5 grenades exploded outside a polling station. This attack also happened in that same island. The region is a haven for multiple armed groups. Now, across the archipelago, with a population of more than 109 million, over 65 million Filipinos are eligible to vote and even elect a new president, a new vice president, 12 of the 24-seat Senate, and members of the House of Representatives. Also, over 18,000 national and local positions are up for grabs. Filipinos thronged primary schools and other polling stations to elect a new president. People wearing masks began forming long queues before dawn to cast their votes when polling stations opened. More than 60,000 security personnel have been deployed to protect polling stations and also election workers. There are 10 candidates running for the presidential election, including the son of former Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos. And the incumbent Vice President Leni Robredo. In the Philippines, the winner only has to get more votes than anyone else. Polls showed Marcos Jr. heading for a landslide. He had a double-digit lead over Robredo in the latest surveys, while Marcos Jr. had a 75% chance of winning. Analysts say the outcome is not guaranteed. If victorious, it will be the return of the Marcos family to power, 36 years after they were toppled in a popular uprising and the family chased into exile. The winner of Monday's election will take office on June the 30th for a single 6-year term. The new president stands to inherit problems including a pandemic-battered economy, deep poverty, and the legacy of a brutal anti-drugs crackdown. For more insight on this story, we are being joined by journalist Dave from Manila. Dave, you met with 2 men who were tortured during the regime of Marcos Sr. What do they think of the possibility of his son becoming president?
Both of them told me it makes them sick to their stomach to think that the son of Ferdinand Marcos Sr., the late dictator, that his son may be on the verge of becoming president. These 2 men, I spent the better part of a day with them as they went around door to door to tell and share their stories with people. One of them, Danilo de la Fuente, well, he had Russian roulette done on him, a .38 revolver pointed to his head. The revolver, the barrel spun several times and then the trigger pulled. Happened multiple times, he said, while he was in prison over a 4-year stretch. He also went through electric torture. The other man, Santiago Matella, he had electric torture to what he said, quote, his private part. And they are just 2 of thousands of people that went through torture during the regime of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. But the thing is they would talk to people. Some people would respond and really listen to what they said, and other people would just dismiss it. I spoke to one woman, a woman in her mid-50s, who called it fake news. Now, she was alive during the reign of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. She was not a little girl back at that time. She certainly would have a lot of conscious memory of it. And she said, look, I didn't see any of it in my neighborhood. I didn't see any of this sort of stuff. So she can look me in the eye and say that, but keep in mind, during the days of martial law, if you kept to yourself and followed the rules, and your family did the same, and your neighbors did the same, you probably wouldn't see any of that. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just probably means it happened somewhere else. And these 2 men said it is disgusting, and that's why they were adamant about going door to door, hoping they could persuade more people not to vote for Marcos Jr. Keep in mind, Marcos Jr., he has never apologized for that. He has dismissed questions when people ask him about his father's rule, when they ask him about the billions of dollars that the family is accused of stealing during the reign of Marcos Sr., he just dismisses the questions.
Dave, let me ask you this. Many Catholic priests actively campaign for one candidate. Which one? And why is it so controversial?
Well, that candidate is Leni Robredo. the leading opposition candidate. And there's a group of more than 1,200 Catholic priests, nuns, missionaries who are out actively campaigning for Robredo. I went to a Catholic mass just a couple of weeks ago where the priest in his homily called Marcos Jr. evil and tried to persuade people not to vote for Marcos Jr. I then followed him afterwards as he went campaigning door to door. He put on a pink shirt, which is the color of the Lenny Robredo campaign. And he was just one of several people that I spoke to, but him I actually followed. I went to his Sunday mass and had spent a full day with him. Now, why is it so controversial? Well, a lot of people believe that Catholic priests, while they can certainly talk in their mass about what really went on during the brutal Marcos Sr. regime and talk about the realities of that, but a lot of people feel that they should not be picking one candidate and campaigning for them. I spoke to some people in that pastor's own church who feel he shouldn't have been doing that. And the Catholic Bishops' Conference also said that priests should not be actively campaigning and should not be publicly choosing a candidate and announcing it to the public. But a lot of priests did it anyway. Keep in mind, the Catholic Church here is very powerful and influential, and priests have a lot of influence over their people. 80% of the population in the Philippines is Catholic.
Dave, what are the projections so far? How was voting process today, despite the attacks at polling stations?
There were certainly some real issues. More than 1,800 vote counting machines broke down. Nowhere near enough replacements to go around. There were voting irregularities. People standing in line, reports of some people standing in line well over 4 hours. Lenny Robredo, the leading opposition candidate, she stood in line for almost 2 hours to vote today. Now, I certainly don't want to say that this would be enough that we would not get the proper result. Keep in mind, if you count people who are registered to vote both in this country and Filipinos who live overseas who are registered to vote, you're talking about roughly 67 million. So I'm not going to say anything that this would have any impact on the final result. Now, there was initially hope that we might find out who the winner is, even if it's an unofficial projected winner, but maybe that we would know later tonight. But that's not going to happen. Vote verification is not going to even start till 1 o'clock tomorrow. Maybe we could get a result tomorrow, or it could even take a few days. We just don't know yet.
Live from Manila, journalist Dave Grunenbaugh, thank you very much for your insights and for talking to us today.
Sure thing.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.